Hello, we've saved you a seat. Welcome to Train Station at 8, a video game music podcast. I'm Steven, your host again, and I'm here with my fellow co-host, Bryan. Hello to you, Bryan.
Hey, how you doing, Steven?
Pretty good. How you doing, Bryan?
I'm doing wonderfully. How are you doing?
That was a perfect introduction. Speaking of introductions, we have a guest with us here as well, and that would be Soule from Battle Bards, a fellow video game music podcast.
Oh my gosh, how is she doing?
Hey, guys. I am very well, thank you. Hey, Steven. Hey, Bryan. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, we are excited too. I've been listening to Battle Bards for quite a while now. I remember the day I stumbled upon that show. I was on the hunt again, as I am often, for new video game music podcasts. And I saw that your show was about MMOs, like exclusively, and that got me really excited. And I started to look at the recent playlist you had done, and there were songs from World of Warcraft and Anarchy Online, and I started getting more and more excited. And I've been listening for 6 months now. So,
awesome!
You guys do good work.
I'm happy to hear that.
Since you do massively multiplayer online games, are those all RPGs, or have you tried to do music from MAG or massively multiplayer games that aren't necessarily also RPGs?
Well, we are sort of talking about it for the future. We could feature MOBAs, for instance. And every now and then we're a bit borderline, I guess. We had a show on post-apocalyptic MMOs recently. And I think some of them were a bit more, not very RPG, more like action MMOs or, or very instant sort of lobby MMOs. So every now and then we deviate from that, but the RPGs, they also tend to have the massive soundtracks. So very often it's MMORPGs, yeah.
And but Soule is not the lone member of Battle Bards. You actually have two fellow Battle Barders. Can I call you Battle Barders? I guess Battle Bards would probably be a better name.
You can call us the bickering bards. I guess, I have two co-hosts, and they suck because they're not here today. Mm-hmm. We try to sort of juggle with the dates, but it's always very hard for us to even record Battle Bards once a month. We do 2 shows back to back. And it's just schedules and Mother's Day today and whatnot. So
oh my gosh,
it was a bit hard.
I mean, scheduling is both the most fun and most horrible part of podcasting sometimes.
Yes. And I'm kind of proud. You guys actually just hit 50 shows, and so did we.
Oh, wow.
Yay.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And we never missed, a schedule yet. We were always on schedule so far. We have 2 shows
really
per month. So, yeah.
Well, you're joining us, on an episode where we skipped 2 weeks in a row. So we don't quite have the shining record. And I guess we should probably address that before we go into the rest of the episode. Sure. We've been kind of vague and hinting on Twitter that we've been reconstructing some of the podcast stuff. Mm-hmm. We haven't really been happy with the direction of Train Station at 8 recently. Not to say that we don't like the show, but we've been doing it for 50 episodes. Mm-hmm. And as per our usual tendencies, we get tired of a format if we use it too long. Mm-hmm. We can never seem to stick around doing one thing for months at a time.
We are ADD podcasters.
I guess so. So luckily, we were brainstorming last night and thought up some new format ideas, and it's not 100% finalized, but next week we're going to try it out, and I am much more excited to push the podcast forward. So this might be the last podcast that we use this tried and true 1 song a week formula. So appreciate it.
That's exciting. So are you actually thinking of incorporating more music in the future? More tracks?
Potentially. I don't want to nail it down because we haven't quite decided yet, but we might be doing more things like, I don't know if anyone out there actually listened to our case study of Sonic Adventure 2, but it was kind of an in-depth look at one game soundtrack. We might do more of that, but we also might focus more on smaller segments as well, give it more of a variety show kind of feel. So whether that means more or less music, I don't know yet, but
we are going to be singing the entire podcast.
That's Train Station at 8, a permanent musical.
I gotta say, I was always really amazed and impressed that you managed to just pick one track. Because, it's usually for us, every other week we challenge each other with a theme, right? So it's always a different bard that comes up with a challenge. And then we have to pick 2 to 3 tracks per MMO soundtrack. And it's so hard. Like, and you guys only get to talk about this one track. And I always wondered, how do they do it? It's just so hard.
We cheat a little bit, is the honest, brutal truth. Yeah. For example, we talk about Mario 64 and we choose the main theme, otherwise known as Bob-omb Battlefield. But that represents the game, sure. But we end up talking about most of the other music too, just by nature of the episode. So
the primary difference is we just play one song in full, but we kind of play in the background different songs as we talk about them. So a lot of different music kind of gets sampled across the show by the time we're done.
But, and not to talk about our own shows for the entire episode, but one more thing I wanted to mention is the challenge idea that you were talking about, Sil. I find awesome. Yeah. Because sometimes, you guys will have to come to the show, bringing songs from a game that you may not even like very much. And so you're like, well, I was looking through the soundtrack and this is the best track I could find.
Exactly. Yeah.
We just had really interesting.
We had a very painful show yesterday. Because Steph chose a very abstract topic, and she and her, we were kind of, in the groove, and we totally knew what we were talking about. And Sip, he just didn't get it at all. And he just he hated all of it. Like, so every now and then we have this really, really, big difference between who likes a soundtrack or a topic and who hates it. And then we have these discussions. And I guess that's what's fun to our audience, or so I hear. So
yeah, well, I like that because a lot of video game music podcasts I listen to, they're good, but they're often just very agreeable. Often they're also are playing music that they all like. So it kind of just becomes a little bit similar from song to song where they're like, this song is awesome. Now, why is it awesome? And everyone kind of agrees on that point. Kind of the most interesting episodes are when there's a song that comes up that maybe isn't very good, or at least some people don't think it is. And I think that leads to a lot more conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Like and, we are doing this show very much for ourselves as well. Like, it's really so much fun, and we have this exchange, and I learn a lot, and I discover so many tracks that I usually wouldn't. So, it's just very, very fruitful, I guess, for us as well, because you get to hear all this music, and every now and then you really hate it, and you let the other person know. But there've been so many wonderful tracks that I got to know because of my co-hosts. Yeah. So, it's very nice.
It is very hard to play all of the MMOs to hear all the music in them. So you never have time for that.
Right, exactly. Well, that's why I like listening to these podcasts, because I can't play all the games, but I can listen to all the podcasts for the most part. But speaking of sharing music that we enjoy listening to, let's kick off this particular show with what we've been listening to.
Oh shoot, I forgot to compile a list because I've been listening to a lot lately.
Oh really?
I'm going to jump into my iTunes library and look while you guys go.
All right. Well, Sil, why don't you start then? What have you been listening to recently? Video game music or otherwise?
Yes, definitely a lot of video game music. For one thing, prepping for Battle Bards, right? So, I have been listening to a lot of Ion again lately. Just because I love this soundtrack so much. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Ion.
I know the game. Oh, wow, we said that. Soundtrack. Yeah, it's the one with everyone has wings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most beautiful soundtracks there is. And it's pretty big by now. Huge library of tracks. And it is one of the most amazing soundtracks, really. There are a couple of Korean games that just have amazing soundtracks. And Ion is one. And Lineage 2 is one that I always go back to. So lately I've been listening to a lot of Lineage 2 town music again because I just love those tracks. And
that's great. From the little I've heard from Lineage 2, it is very, very lovely stuff.
Very lovely. Like these two are really, if you've never really looked into them, you definitely should. And otherwise, I'm listening to Beatbuddy.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the rhythm platformer thingy, right?
Yeah. And it has really, really awesome music. You should check it out sometime. Very, very groovy and sort of different artists have contributed to the soundtrack and different bands and such, and it's just a very groovy soundtrack overall. So,
that's very cool. Yeah. I actually own that game. It's in my Steam library somewhere. I really should try it.
Yeah, you have to check out the soundtrack. I like to listen to it when I'm driving. It's just so much fun. So
very cool.
It's interesting. I was looking at the music for Ion. What's interesting to me about that game is it's composed, it looks like, by an Eastern composer, which is not the norm for MMOs. Like, every MMO I can think of is a Western composer. At least all the ones I played. I'm sure there are a lot of Korean MMOs out there.
Yeah, you're probably playing a lot of Western MMOs.
And I was just going to say, because all the Asian MMOs usually have Eastern composers.
That's a good point. I guess all the like mainstream ones are typically Western. And was Guild Wars an Eastern publisher but Western developers?
Yeah.
Or was that all in the West?
And it's NCSoft, right? So when they're like this huge powerhouse that have lots of MMOs that they're publishing. But ArenaNet is an American studio, right?
Right. So it sounds like an Eastern publisher with a Western developer for Guild Wars.
And definitely a Western composer, Jeremy Soule.
Oh yes, very much. The
Westernist of Western composers.
Yeah, that's true. I guess Aeon stuck out to me because I remember that being fairly mainstream around here when it came out, but it is an Eastern developed game, so I guess I never really thought about how that would translate to the soundtracks. So I'd be curious to hear how it's like different.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anyway.
Oh, you know what? What is Ragnarok Online? That's an Eastern developed game, right?
Yeah.
I love that soundtrack. That's one that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is definitely on our list as well. We have had people comment that we should do a show sometime. So definitely want to do that.
It's another huge soundtrack.
Yeah, it's huge. I've gone through the whole thing and marked them with 1 to 5 stars. And so now I found like the really special standout ones, and I just listen to those over and over again.
I keep going back to whether things are MMOs or not, but do you guys qualify Phantasy Star Online?
Ooh, sort of.
Yeah, I think we would. Yeah, why not?
That's kind of what it has to come down to.
It's not really massively, is it?
No, not so
really
much. But back when it came out on the Dreamcast, it certainly felt massive.
It kind of feels like the original Guild Wars in that way, where you have your hubs, but then you kind of go out and you're typically with 2 or 3 other people. But I love the soundtrack for that. Another interesting one because it's sci-fi and not orchestral. I think it had a really cool sound to it.
We've done an episode on that semi-recently.
It must have been one of the first console MMOs besides Final Fantasy XI, I think.
Yeah.
There's not many. 11? 11 was on the PS2, right? So
yeah. And
weren't they
sort
sort
of
of
Dreamcast, so
they would have been pretty close.
Sort of same era, yeah.
yeah. We'll say they're about the same time because I don't want to look up all of these releases.
No, that would be boring.
Yes, it would.
So anything else on your plate, music-wise, Sil?
Well, on and off, always. I'm listening to the, Blake Robinson's Synthetic Orchestra.
Oh, yes, I am familiar.
Yeah, I'm listening to the Chrono Trigger soundtrack all of the time just because it's like my favorite game of all time and favorite music of all time. And so I listen to that a lot, just generally.
I do love I have barely played any Chrono Trigger, but I already love the music.
Oh, it's amazing.
I cannot deny that.
Mitsuda and, Nobuo Uematsu for Final Fantasy, those two composers are like the gods of my VGM pantheon. Like, they're really like my favorite composers, and they've been so important for me. Like, just in getting into video game music and just stellar composers, really.
Well, I think, to risk getting on a huge tangent, I think Nobuo Uematsu is one of the first people to treat video game music seriously. Yeah. And his orchestrations hold up to full orchestration to this very day. He would insert operas into his games. It was crazy stuff.
With the Distant Worlds shows.
Yeah. It's still going on.
There. Yeah. I keep, watching when they'll be back to Europe because I really, really want to go sometime. It's like one of my big, big to-dos.
Yeah. I mean, Bryan and I never really got into Final Fantasy and thus never really got into Nobuo Uematsu's music that much. But especially recently, I've come to appreciate the music. Even if I don't have the nostalgic ties that a lot of people have, I understand why it's so important to so many people. It really is phenomenal music.
Yeah, it is.
So, well, Bryan, what's been up with you? Have you remembered what you've been listening to?
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot. So people who listen to the show probably know I'm a fan of Ace Combat music.
I know that.
You know that, yeah, which is the series of flight simulators that Namco used to put out and now killed with the free-to-play game and don't care about anymore. But I won't.
Oh, you mean like Soul Calibur?
Pretty much like everything Namco does right now.
Aww.
But oh well. At least they're not Konami, but we won't get onto that tangent right now. But I've been a really big fan of Ace Combat 5 and Ace Combat 6, since those are the most recent, most orchestral, and I think most elaborate soundtracks they've done. Excellent stuff. But I decided I kind of wanted to go back and see like the origins of it. So I've been listening to Air Combat, which was the first Ace Combat game, as well as Ace Combat 2 and now Ace Combat 3. And Air Combat was interesting. Steven, you listened through the soundtrack as well. What did you think of it?
Well, first of all, it sounds nothing like Ace Combat.
Yes.
Like, exchange the soaring strings and modern militaristic, electronic elements with like organs and wacky guitar solos.
Yeah.
And lots
very
of
much an arcade game.
Some woodwinds for
Donkey Kong Country
measure.
style stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an uneven soundtrack. I found I got a little bored through certain parts, but the songs that are good are really good.
Yeah, they're just jazzy, fun. There's a lot of like prog and jazz fusion influence throughout the whole album, which is really different from modern Ace Combat games.
Very different.
I think that it was an arcade game, first and foremost. It wasn't about being epic. It wasn't about a story. It was about go shoot the bad guys and fly a plane around for 10 minutes before you had to put another quarter in. So it's like, it was completely trying to get a different vibe across. I think the console release of Air Combat was just a port. So
that makes sense.
That was similar for Ace Combat 2, I believe, but that game was it was like the transition period where there was a lot of guitar work and kind of rocking arcade music, but they also had some music that was like orchestral and more, not ambient, but more of building tension rather than playing just a melody for you, which is very much what modern Ace Combat music is about. So it was just interesting to see that develop over time. The interesting thing about Ace Combat 3 is it was not continuing to develop that sound. It took place, the story of that game took place in 2040, so it was like trying to create a future sound. So the whole soundtrack is very electronic, way more electronic than 2 or 4 or 5 or like any of the other Ace Combat games.
Like atmospheric, like loopy electronic, or
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
It was very much trying to be ambient and cool and make you feel like you're in the future. So it was interesting to hear. I definitely heard elements of that came forward into 5 and 6. If you listen to those soundtracks, there are a lot of electronic elements, especially in 5. But this was a soundtrack that was almost like purely electronic. There's very little guitar work, very little orchestral work. It's an interesting period for the series that's almost more of like a sci-fi game than a traditional Ace Combat game.
That's quite interesting. It reminds me of San Francisco Rush 2049.
Yeah, it's kind of similar in that. I don't love the music in 3. I don't think it's super great so far. At least it doesn't grab me.
Is it a different composer?
Actually, it is a composer that worked on a lot of 2's music, I believe. Or maybe about a third of 2's soundtrack. And then he basically got full reign over 3's soundtrack. And then I think it went on to other composers in 4. 4 is the game that really got the modern sound down. The only thing holding 4's soundtrack back is just their attempts at synthesizing an orchestra could only be so good on the PS2. So it was before people really got that down. Which 5 and 6 had. So yeah, as a huge Ace Combat fan, I've listened to 5 and 6 like repeatedly, some of my very favorite video game soundtracks ever. It's been cool to go back and kind of see the history and lineage.
The only person who even comes close to your appreciation of Ace Combat is, I think, Andrew Lures.
Yes.
I think he really loves those soundtracks. I don't know anyone else who cares. No. I mean, other than me, I love the music, but it's not very popular.
One reason I bring it up a lot is, I never hear it mentioned in other places. So.
I never really heard of it. So, but I will look it up after this show.
Sure, absolutely.
If you want to start in one place, I think you should listen to the theme of Ace Combat 5.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's like basically like choir and orchestra for the entire piece. They got an actual live choir and orchestra to play the whole thing, and it's absolutely stunning. Amazing.
It's one of the songs I always show to people who don't know video game music to shock them into what video game music can accomplish.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds very interesting. I should definitely look into that.
Sure, it's beautiful stuff. Speaking of beautiful stuff, I have been listening to the Ni no Kuni soundtrack as well.
Oh, how delightful.
Yes.
And that's just, that's
Very
amazing
beautiful.
stuff. For people who don't know, Ni no Kuni is a Japanese RPG that, Studio Ghibli? Is that how you pronounce it? Ghibli?
No, I think it's Ghibli.
Ghibli? Okay.
Ghibli.
Anyway, the people who put out all those great anime movies helped with this game. The interesting part of that, beyond doing a lot of the visual design, is they got their composer, Joe Hisaishi, to do the music. So it's a film composer doing a video game, and that's very, very apparent, because this stuff sounds like it's from a movie. It's very flowing, it's very... it's weird to say it's very fully orchestrated, but you can hear the room this orchestra is recording in. It's got a very warm sound to it all. It's really exquisitely composed and exquisitely played, and when that stuff really takes off and plays the main themes, it's hard to beat. So I've been enjoying that a lot. There is a lot of downtime and kind of uninteresting songs because a lot of it is for cutscenes and, you know, in similar ways to film score, I don't always find that stuff supremely listenable. But I've been enjoying it. I listened to the first disc of the 2 discs, and it was good listening. I definitely recommend people check that out as well. I'm a fan of the Ni no Kuni stuff. But yeah, it's been a long few weeks since we last recorded. Trying to think if there's anything else huge I listened to. A lot of Mario 64's soundtrack. Yeah,
that's true. And you've been playing Mario 64, so...
Indeed, I have. For some reason, I decided to try to get 120 stars in that, because why not? And I'm getting really frustrated on that sand level.
Oh no, with the jumping boxes that pull you into the quicksand?
Yeah, that and the annoying little crow thing that flies around and you have to grab the star out of his talons.
Yeah. It's been a long time, but I still remember.
But it's been amazingly fun, and I just forgot how good that soundtrack is. But we talked about that a lot on the last episode. So
I think we can probably skip
I won't go into detail on that. But yep, that's about been what I'm listening to. All video game music for me, for the most part.
Okay.
You?
I was hoping you'd fill that void because I'm trying to remember. Okay, I've been listening to a lot of unexpected things. Unexpected thing number 1 is I found that you had a Relient K album in your library.
I do.
So I stole that.
Got that on recommendation.
And I know we have a friend who likes Relient K a lot. And Relient K is what? They're kind of a punk rock, a little bit of pop,
it's hard to call
Christian
them punk.
Band.
I would say they're a pop rock with a little bit of punk.
Okay, yeah, I had that mixed up.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's like heartwarmingly teenager.
Yeah.
Like, all the songs are about how he has problems and how he's confused, but how he's going to do better tomorrow, and he regrets all of his mistakes, but it's all this really upbeat, like, electric guitar-driven stuff.
And I still hate consequences, and running from you is one of my best defenses. Consequences, God don't make me face up to this, and I still hate consequences, and running from you is one of my best defenses. 'Cause I know that I let you down, and I don't wanna deal with that.
But on the other hand, it kind of annoys me on a deep level, so I'm not sure if I like it or not.
Yeah, it kind of feels like stuff you'll hear on EA Tracks if you're playing a Burnout game for 2002.
Sure, yeah. The thing is, it has an era, it has a feel to it, a little bit of a nostalgic tinge, so I appreciate it, but I don't think I'm going to listen to it again anytime soon.
No, you don't need to.
I also listen to Air Combat, like we mentioned before, which is really fun. And I've had to do some driving around in the morning recently, which I don't normally do. I usually like to eat breakfast in the morning.
Just eat breakfast while driving.
I've been switching things around. So I've been listening to the Viva Pinata soundtrack again.
Really?
I love the Viva Pinata soundtrack.
That's awesome.
One of my
shrill
favorites.
Game.
And well, the thing is, it's really good for when you're trying to wake up because it eases you into the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's man, Grant Kirkhope, I think it's his best work. I know people love Banjo-Kazooie, but I really think that's probably his ultimate masterpiece, which is saying a lot. Speaking of Kirkhope, he and David Wise recently released a couple of tracks from Yooka-Laylee, which is the Kickstarted platformer from the X-Rare people. So listeners, I don't know if you've heard that yet, but you should go over there and see which one you like more. I think, Bryan, you like the David Wise track a little bit more than the Kirkhope one.
A
yes?
lot more, yes.
Oh, a lot more?
Mm-hmm. I didn't find the Kirkhope track was very good, but that's just me.
It was good. It was a little bit standard Banjo-Tooie.
Yeah, it felt like Kirkhope just being Kirkhope, which is okay, but it didn't feel like he was doing anything new. And I've never been a fan of, like, jungle music in games. Mm-hmm. I think it's very often plotting and boring, and I thought that was kind of plotting and boring, so.
Fair enough. I'm just so happy that he's working on a project with David Wise. I don't really care.
I know. It's awesome. Don't get me wrong. I'm excited about what he's going to do. I just wasn't very impressed by that song.
Yeah, I get that.
What I am excited about is they reached their stretch goal where it's all going to be orchestrated.
Yeah, that'll really change it.
Yeah.
Because both of them could do truly great things with an orchestration.
Has David Wise worked with one before on a game?
I don't know.
I don't recall one.
I can't think of a time. That's really interesting. I wonder how he'll do.
Well.
And I guess the last thing I'll mention is Rayman Origins.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I love that.
Legends. Rayman Legends, the second game.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I listened to that also in the car. Huge album. Just put a big smile on my face. I especially loved the levels where essentially they riff on the James Bond films for a while. It's
yes, I remember those
splendidly done. And all of the names for those levels are like puns on spy movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Oh, you should play the game if you haven't. I mean, I think it's hands down the greatest jump and run or platformer that I've played since, the Mario games, really. It's so amazing, like visually and the action and the music, and it's just so amazing. Like, it's one of the best buys, I think, that I have on Steam, and I've played so many hours, I think last Christmas. And the music is in my, top BGMs for 2014. I do, a top every year at the end of every year in December. And, yeah, that is an amazing soundtrack, but the game is really great as well. You should really, really look into it.
Luckily, we did look into it. We beat the game in co-op, actually.
Ooh, cool.
So we played through it together, and everything you said is 100% right. And part of the reason why the soundtrack lacks a little bit when you listen to it on its own, because part of the comedy and the genius of the music came from how beautifully it synchronized with the action.
Yeah,
and
true.
Divorced from that, it does kind of lose something. So it's actually better in game, which is a huge.
It reminds me of listening to like the Shadow of the Colossus music, as fantastically composed as that stuff is. It really is a, and it's another reason I think film scores aren't very good outside of their components. Is that visual component is so tied into them.
Yeah.
But even more so in Rayman, because sometimes the music actually does change depending on what you're doing.
Well, I mean, in a film score, that's absolutely critical.
Yeah.
But more than like Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, I was more speaking to
sure. And if you think about like old video game music, a lot of that stuff was created like just kind of divorced from the project itself, which is some reason a lot of that melody-driven stuff from the NES and SNES works so well on its own, is because sometimes those composers didn't even know what the game was. What they were really doing for it.
I think that's one reason. Good music. I think that's one reason we both like Sonic music so much, because even to this day, they pretty much just find like a talented musician, put him in a box, say write some music to this game, complete songs, A to Z, and then we'll put them in the game. But anyway, that's about all I've been listening to. There's more, but we don't have all that here. So let's move on to talking about the song in question today, which is from Guild Wars 2, appropriately an MMO. And the song we're going to be talking about here in a minute is Saga of the Norn by the wondrous Jeremy Soule. And I have a few points I'm looking forward to talking about this, but before we do that, I think we ought to give a quick background that we have with the game. And maybe, Sil, could you start? Did you play this game like when it first came out?
Yes, I did actually wait on this game very, very impatiently for quite a long time. I played World of Warcraft very extensively for more than 6 years. And then I played some Rift and some other games because I got tired of World of Warcraft like everyone does at some point. And certainly before Cataclysm, everyone sort of left, and I did. And I was really fed up with some of these typical sort of MMO mechanics, like maybe, the Holy Trinity and things like that. And then when they announced Guild Wars 2, halfway through, I got so excited for the game, and I saw these beautiful screenshots and artworks, and Jeremy Soule was composing, and so I was waiting for launch, and I played on launch weekend, and I was a Norn actually from the very beginning. So I did play this for a good while, for a year. I also did some PvP, world versus world, and did all the dungeons and the usual stuff. And then I kind of ran out of endgame, which is like one of the big issues of Guild Wars 2. And but I did play it for a year, which is a long time in MMO years nowadays. Anyway.
And I think Guild Wars 2 can kind of get away with not having an extensive end game feast, because everything up to the end game is so exceptionally well designed
and beautiful. And
exactly. It's just a pleasure to play. And really, your story is kind of similar to ours. Except we were even more centered on World of Warcraft. We've been playing that since...
Oh, wait.
Yeah, I guess
so
around Lich King.
For sure.
Yeah. So it's not... we weren't there from the beginning, but when we discovered...
we did stick with it past Cataclysm.
We did. Barely. By the skin of our teeth.
They tested us, that's for sure.
But before that, we had played Anarchy Online and Age of Camelot, and we hated all MMOs, despised every single one we played. I mean, I know that all those games have their own special qualities, but it was just too hard to get
Unfortunately, one of those special qualities was being bad.
Or at least being so confusing, we couldn't figure out how to use an item. Maybe that was our problem. I don't know. But World of Warcraft famously invited everyone into the MMO camp, and it was approachable. So we completely fell in love with everything about World of Warcraft. But as time went on, we started to get a little, especially after Cataclysm, we started to get a little dissuaded by some of the decisions they're making, and the gameplay just wasn't holding up for us anymore. And so, like you, Sil, we were following the development of Guild Wars 2, saying, if they pull off all the things they are saying they're going to pull off, this might actually get us to switch MMOs, which is unthinkable. And I can't say it got us to switch MMOs, but it got us to split our time, which is an accomplishment in its own. We kind of played it on and off for, 6 months or maybe a year. And I never really stopped because I got tired of it. I just had other things to do, I guess. But I would still love to go back to Guild Wars 2 at some point.
Well, it doesn't have a subscription, so it's kind of the perfect MMO to play along with the MMO that you're paying for monthly. So you can always play a bit of Guild Wars 2.
Yeah, I was really impressed with some of the stuff they did. I think the thing that I actually liked most was how it would scale your level to the place you were leveling in, which just made it like so much easier to level and say, oh, you're, I have a friend who's starting out and is 15 levels lower than me. Well, I can go to his zone and now I'll be level 6 as well. And we could both play that content together. It just made it like so much easier to play stuff. You didn't have to worry about, oh shoot, I'm over leveled, I'm under leveled. Like, where should I be? Wherever you went, so long as the level cap was equal or below you, you could just do the content there. And that just made it such a more enjoyable experience where in WoW you had to stay on a specific path or things get really problematic really quickly.
Yeah, I agree. It felt a lot more like horizontal. Progression-wise, I think. And what I really loved about it, the Holy Trinity thing aside, because I got so tired in World of Warcraft of, waiting for tanks or healers, and you don't have that in Guild Wars 2. So that's awesome. You can always play with your friends, no matter what role they are. And the other thing that I really loved is just the way you can explore and, go on an adventure in this world, like with the vistas and also all the events, like the dynamic events that are happening and the hard quests. The fact that you don't have a quest, like a quest inventory anymore or a quest list, but you just go from place to place and quests are actually happening around you and they're tied to the location. They're not tied to you the way they are in World of Warcraft, right? So I love that. I love that. I love the fact that the world feels alive and stuff happens when I get there. It's not written on my screen somewhere. So
it's so much more freeing because you can just walk somewhere and all the quests will automatically be abandoned and all the quests in the new area will automatically be opened. You don't have to run around between 10 people and fill up your quest log again. Yeah,
exactly. No quest log.
That was a huge thing. And the mechanics combined with the art, combined with the music, to me kind of put it second only and gameplay-wise, surpassing World of Warcraft. I'll probably still never find a world that I get more invested in and feel more at home in than Azeroth and its accompanying portals and whatnot. But Guild Wars is a second, MMO-wise. It, like you said, Sil, you can actually go on adventures that feel worth going on in that game.
Yeah. And the huge dragons. Oh my god.
Yeah, you can climb stuff and there aren't a bunch of invisible walls, blocking you from getting where you want to go. It's a very cool game. And I started off, I don't know, was this the first race I chose? The one I settled on was what are the little short dudes called?
Azura,
yes. I really like them. I didn't think I would, but I guess it makes sense. I like gnomes in World of Warcraft. I'm that person.
I think when we started, I played in Azura and you played the plant people.
Oh yeah, right. Clearly we're invested in the lore. The plant people and the short people were my original races.
Yes, exactly.
Sylvari, they're called.
The Sylvari. I knew there was something, and I was going to say Sylvanas, and I'm like, wait, nope, wrong lore there. But then we had a friend who was playing a Norn, and we ended up doing like our initial leveling in the Norn area. Yeah. So that's kind of where we were all gathered and playing through, was that very beautiful like forest and hills and snowy mountains of the Norn people.
And the Norn people are a very, let's say, warlike, independent, sort of Viking, I would almost say.
One might say they're Norse-inspired.
Norse? Well, that's going too far, Brian. They're the Norn, after all. I don't want to draw any
How did you get that idea?
They're certainly brave, warrior northern folk.
Yep.
And lots of snow, lots of warm huts with fires in it. And one thing I found very interesting is that Jeremy Soule wrote the music to this game, and including the Norn music, and he also wrote the soundtrack to Skyrim.
Yes.
With the Nords.
The Nords, precisely. A snowy warrior focused land of the Nords. So I'm very interested to compare and contrast that between Skyrim.
Well, I still think, as much as I love Guild Wars 2 and the soundtrack, Skyrim is like off the charts, the most amazing thing that he's ever done. I mean, I love Skyrim to bits.
I agree. The only thing I think is better is maybe the other Elder Scrolls games, but I hold all of them in very high regard. Yeah. So anyway, the song that we're going to play today is Saga of the Norn, which I believe plays during the Norn intro cinematic and possibly throughout the game as well.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yes. You've already learned something, Bryan, so if anyone can correct me, feel free, but I think that's the case. So let's play that now so you listeners can get a taste of it. That was Saga of the Norn by Jeremy Soule. Quite a rousing piece, wouldn't you say?
Very much so. I think it's awesome for sort of, rise heroes and get ready for battle. And it's a very, like, a call to arms, right?
I agree entirely. And in fact, when we were deciding on a song to choose for this episode, we had a few to send to you, Sil, and you focused on this one. And what convinced me was when you said it had more of a story to tell than the other songs. Mm-hmm. And I listened to it again, and I realized you're right. It very much has a pace that, like, picks up more and more throughout the piece. And I think there's a lot to discuss about it. So, hey, Bryan, I've got a question that I wanted to ask you before the show, but I saved it until now.
All right. Is it about the song?
It is about the song.
That's good.
No, I was going to ask you, could you pick up some milk at the grocery store later on?
No.
Good.
What do you want to talk about?
So, what do you think about that main melody?
I think it's a little bit unoriginal. Like, it feels very basic to me. It also, it kind of feels to me like a knockoff of the theme of Gondor from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, explain.
All right. So the first three notes are basically the three notes from the theme of Gondor.
You mean the dun 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 dun?
The three notes.
Oh.
Dun dun dun. That's exactly how the theme of Gondor
That is
opens.
very limited, though, right?
But that's super limited. Oh, I know. But I just find it's also trying to get like a similar tone across. This idea of a bombastic, I mean, of course, you're going to write a theme about a call to arms is a good way to put it, I think. And that's what this is. This is similar to what Gondor was when Gondor was in its ascension. They also used that theme in Lord of the Rings for like the tragic kind of fall of Gondor. But when it was at its fullest height, it was trying to accomplish something very similar to this song. So obviously it's kind of a, what would you say, a joking statement to just compare it to Gondor, because they are trying to do similar things.
Right. I mean, it's squarely an epic fantasy soundtrack, and a lot of them sound similar to this, especially if you're trying to elicit a heroic quest.
Oh, for sure. I just find the main theme of this is not my favorite part of the song in general, especially in how it's played originally. Cause it basically opens the song with the main theme, with that very low horn. I'm not actually positive what type of horn that is, but it's very Jeremy Soule-esque.
Yeah. The man with the horns, right? Like, always. Like, horns and then strings and drums, and you got the Jeremy Soule track.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, this, even the specific horn sounds very similar to the sorts of things he uses in Elder Scrolls combat music. It's got a lot of reverb to it. It's very low. It's very bombastic, and it can hold its own as a solo horn. So it's like, it's a very, it's got a lot of impact to it for being, I believe, just a single instrument rather than an ensemble. But when it opens the theme, I just find it kind of plodding. It doesn't work for me. The chord progression to me is a little bit dull. It just goes in a expected route, except maybe the last one or two chords in it. And I just find it's the call to arms theme kind of distilled, but it doesn't really do anything that surprises me or makes me interested in it.
Which is a failing for a call to arms song if it doesn't get you excited. But still,
I would be the soldier there, everyone's cheering, and I'm just going, And they're like, you need to find the war. And I'm like, yeah, but that wasn't very good chord progression. They're like, you're the worst soldier.
We're gonna go make you hang out with the elves and pluck some harps for a while. In the meantime, Syl, what do you think about that theme?
I'm sort of like half, like 50-50 with you, Bryan, maybe. I gotta say, I do really, really like this track. For me, it's very, very Norn. And I think it's a great track to just represent the style of the soundtrack. Like the music of Guild Wars 2. I think this is a very good intro to get into it. Certainly very Jeremy Soule, like we said. And for me, it's quite stirring. Like I love the energy of it from the beginning. What I do sort of agree with, but, you know, Steven already said it, like these kind of epic, bombastic call to arms tracks. I mean, every self-respecting MMO has a couple. And they always sound a little similar. And if you have a very strong track like this, it's not gonna be necessarily as sophisticated maybe as a more subdued or, you know, more thoughtful track. Maybe it's not going to have the same depth because it's just very powerful. So you can't have both usually with the bombastic tracks. That's just what they are. And for me, it's very Norn and it's kind of very Guild Wars, I think, because it has all these familiar Guild Wars cues in it that people know and love, and also from the first MMO. So I think it's quite a fan favorite from that point of view.
I agree with you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, sorry, Steven, I don't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, cut me off. I'll deal.
Because I am coming at this very much knowing very little of the Guild Wars cues. So it's interesting to hear, like, I listen to like Warcraft music. I'm like, oh, that's that song and that's that little song. And oh, they did a little bit melody there from that song. And I listen to this and it's all completely new to me. So it's very interesting to me, like where that stuff might fit in. But yeah, I agree with you. Kind of the second half of my point, is that I think I focus more on the first time you hear that melody. I think it really comes into its own when they shift the key a little bit and play it with the different instrumentation to close out the piece. I think the melody is much stronger there for me. When that backing horn that I was talking about, the very powerful horn, is used more as an accompanying kind of bass horn, in addition to the main theme being played with that brighter horn and a higher octave, the song really comes together a lot better for me. So I enjoy the ending of it a lot more than the opening.
Is it immature of me to be really mad at you for stealing my point that I was going to make? That's what I
do that all the time on Battle Bards. So.
I was going to say the same thing where at first I'm like, this seems a little generic. But then there was that mid-section that changed the melody around like 1 minute. It starts doing that bum, 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 bum. And I'm like, oh, well, well, that's exciting. And then that momentum carries it straight through the finish where it brings the original theme back. And then I'm on board, and I really like that. That's when my blood starts pumping a little bit.
Yep.
Personally, I'm not even such a big fan of the horns either. Like, my favorite part is like right after, in the beginning, when you just have the strings, and then you just did it with the strings, like and it builds up slowly with the strings. I love that part because it's more, it's a bit more refined. It's not as full on, and I really love the very string heavy tracks in the soundtrack. I'm just trying to remember what my favorite track was called. I think Night of Embers. Yeah, that's the one. If you have time sometime, check that out. Yeah, it's a very powerful track, but it's very string heavy and it's so dramatic and it gets me really pumped.
I want to listen to this whole soundtrack, honestly, and go back to it. It bums me out that it doesn't seem to be on the Direct Sound website.
Yeah.
Where Jeremy Soule sells all
or
his
Direct
music.
Song. Is it Direct Song?
I don't remember, honestly. It might be Direct Song. And then on Amazon, it's like only for pre-owned, like $500 or something. So
I know. I don't really know the best
way
way
to
to
it's not
buy it.
available out there widely.
It was the same with Skyrim as well. It was this weird sort of a standalone webpage that would sell it. And it was really, really hard to find, and it was very expensive. And I think I ordered it, and I never got it. So,
oh no,
yeah.
Oh no,
exactly.
That's terrible.
Isn't ours like digitally signed by Jeremy Soule or
I
something?
don't know. Maybe.
Well, you can buy it on iTunes now. So
you can buy it on iTunes now. You can get it is Direct Song. You can get Skyrim there. You can get Guild Wars. You can get all of Guild Wars expansions. But you
iTunes is the devil.
What?
iTunes is the devil.
iTunes is the devil.
Yeah.
Well, you can also get it directly from Jeremy Soule's website, directsong.com. You can get Skyrim for $16, which is fair.
Quite
but
nice.
There's no Guild Wars 2, and it confuses me.
That's very strange.
So I had to
Well, I just realized that you guys were spot on with the horns because in my notes, one of the first things I wrote was, "There be yon soul, hark the horns." So
what the heck? That's a great note. But yeah, going back to your point, I 100% agree. When I was listening to this song repeatedly, that the part with the strings was my favorite. Like after the opening, when it's just playing those with a little bit of light horn in the background and some choirs, like that's what to me had a much more refined or just enjoyable, I think, enjoyable sound, because I think the horns are just a bit much, especially that one horn when playing a very simple melody, very staccato style. It just got a little bit much overall.
I feel the strings captured the spirit of adventure that Guild Wars 2 carries with it so well.
I agree.
That's a good way of putting it.
And it is, it is a very beautiful soundtrack. And Soule is it's a very accomplished, sophisticated composer, and it's very symphonic, all of it. So, there's just so much to love. But personally, I like the more refined tracks, like we said, the one that also every now and then, they pause and they develop and take their time and they tell a story. I do like that when a track shifts and has sort of transitions in it. So this one here doesn't really have that so much, and I miss transition. So
I agree completely. I think it's also something, for me at least, that Soule has shown his greatest strength is with songs that are more ambient and take more time to build. I find his exploration and ambient music in the Elder Scrolls games are often much, much better than the combat music he composes for them.
But to compare a bit to Elder Scrolls on that note, this is kind of like the combat music that I've always wanted Elder Scrolls to have.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, if this was playing while I was stabbing ice trolls and getting them stuck on rocks and shouting at them, then I think I'd be far more excited than what's in the actual game.
Like, the best combat song in Skyrim is that, reorchestration of the main theme.
The dragon fighting song. That is a good song, man.
It's really good. But I just think in general, Jeremy Soule is typically better at writing quieter, more ambient pieces. I think that's where his real soul lies.
Har, 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 har. I think you're right, though.
you just had to go for that one.
Yeah, every time. You can't really do a good Jeremy pun, so you gotta.
So speaking of Skyrim, though, obviously the Norns are pretty much the same thing as the Nords. And since you wrote a whole soundtrack about the Nord culture, do you think that there are any like similar elements he's using between Skyrim and this song, or did he just go for different styles regardless?
Horns.
Well, I mean specifically to these two games, not to all of his music that has ever existed.
It's kind of hard to say. I mean, orchestration-wise or instrumentation-wise, I think there's definitely there are similarities. But, you know, Guild Wars 2 also is sort of obliged to continue the legacy of Guild Wars, which came out in 2005. So you gotta ask, you know, okay, what's the first Elder Scrolls game that came out? At what time was that?
Well, the first one that Jeremy Soule did was in 2003, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Which is more, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe 2002, I don't know.
You know, we did both a Guild Wars and a Guild Wars 2 show on Battle Bards, and when we did the Guild Wars show, and that was after we did the Guild Wars 2 show, which doesn't really make sense, like, okay, but we did that anyway. And I never played Guild Wars, like the first MMO. And when we went through that soundtrack, I realized that, oh my god, there are so many tracks here that are also in Guild Wars 2. And they're just, you know, a lot more refined in Guild Wars 2, and the orchestration is much nicer, of course. But it's very much also based on the first MMO. And it really, you know, there's like a legacy to be continued. So I'm not sure you can say that Skyrim inspired Guild Wars 2 as much as you can say Guild Wars inspired Guild Wars 2 music.
Yeah. And a lot of the cues and elements that he works into the Skyrim soundtrack are just not present here. Like there are.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is it doesn't honestly remind me very much of Skyrim.
No.
Skyrim went for much darker choruses, lots of male voices, and this has a much higher, fast-paced, adventurous, lighthearted spirit.
Yeah, and it's a bit more regal as well, you know, like the royal real sound to it. And Skyrim always struck me as a very sort of desolate at times.
Lonely,
you know,
perhaps.
Yeah, lonely.
Barbaric.
Exactly, and much rougher. Also the landscape, and I think is rougher.
Yeah, Guild Wars is a much more fantastical, polished world in general, and I think the soundtrack reflects that quite a bit.
But while we're still on the Elder Scrolls comparison, one thing you have to consider is the enormity of the Guild Wars 2 soundtrack. Skyrim is a fairly small soundtrack, all things considered, at least relatively. But Jeremy Soule had to compose so much music for Guild Wars 2. I don't know how he kept the same style going without just straight up running out of ideas. And I think at some point that shows. Some of the music in Guild Wars 2 sounds kind of generic.
And same-ish.
Yeah,
definitely.
Honestly, because I just don't know how you could avoid that. World of Warcraft, I don't even know if it has as much music as Guild Wars 2, and that is separated by, you know, major expansion packs. So those are going to sound really different. But Guild Wars 2 is kind of just one big, great package when it was originally released. So, yeah.
And I think the later tracks for Guild Wars 2, he didn't compose all of them anymore. Like, there's other composers that have done, like, the Halloween stuff, for instance.
Yeah.
So, there's more composers now that have been adding to Guild Wars 2.
Hey, what was that, like retro-inspired...
The Adventure Box?
Adventure Box?
Yeah, Super Adventure Box.
Okay, I couldn't remember what that was called. I wanted to look up that music, because I remember it being pretty fun.
That's really fun, actually. It's a very, very well done homage, you know, to those old games. And we've talked about, I think, 1 or 2 tracks on Battle Bards from that. They're really great fun.
Yeah, that was some of the most fun I had playing Guild Wars 2. I can't believe we stopped playing that game.
It was great. I loved it. It was just like, this is the kind of thing that, you know, a lot of fantasy games would not do. It's really going out there, but Guild Wars had that, you know, sense of randomness and humor.
Guild Wars 2 is very good at taking itself completely seriously, and then at the drop of a pin, reversing that, and just being goofy as all get out.
Did you guys do the Frog King?
I don't think so.
No?
What was that?
It was like one of the later stages. You would have to kill the Frog King. Yeah. It's like a boss encounter inside the Super Adventure Box.
Oh gosh.
That sounds
a lot of fun.
My 3 favorite memories from that was trying to get you, Bryan, to jump up the trees in the forest.
That was so hard.
And you kept falling down repeatedly. I also loved, I think when you died or something, you would like go into some area where you're like being strapped to bombs or some weird sequence that I always liked. And lastly, being in like the overworld of the adventure box and trying to get everyone to dance with me, and no one would ever dance.
That overworld is awesome. You could like jump on the clouds, and there are like so many different places you could go. It was really good. That's kind of off topic.
It is a little bit off topic.
I suppose. Something interesting about this track to me is, do either of you know for sure whether Guild Wars 2 was a synthesized orchestra or a real orchestra?
I'm tempted to say real, but knowing Jeremy Soule's extreme skill with,
because that's the crazy thing about Jeremy Soule is all of the Elder Scrolls games, except for the choir in Skyrim, is synthesized. Which is insane because Skyrim at many times sounds like it could be orchestrated. So I'm curious if he was actually given an orchestra for this game or if he synthesized it, because in either case, it sounds great, for this track.
I mean, I would say that this is a full orchestra if I just listened to it once or twice. But knowing Jeremy Soule, I could easily see this being his own creation from his own computer. I mean,
for how similar it sounds to his other stuff, I'm going to guess it was mostly VSTs, and
especially because there was so much of it.
Yeah,
I don't know if he would get a live recording for every piece. I'd like to know though. We should. Yeah, I wish he would respond to my emails.
It's very, very difficult. Like, it's one of our gripes on the show. You know, we had some composers on in the past, like Chance Thomas from Lotro and such. And Jeremy Soule is basically unreachable.
Yeah.
So never gets back to Sip's emails. He must be very busy and important, of course. But yeah.
The only time I get emails from Jeremy Soule are automatic emails thanking me for donating to his Kickstarter. Yeah. And even then, those are sent through a PR agency he hired. So I'm just like, gosh darn it, Jeremy. You are a very hard man to contact.
Good question, though. I mean, I always assumed that a lot of this was live orchestra, but if it's indeed synthetic, all of it, that would be very impressive.
Yeah. Oh, he's a master of that for sure. I think the best person I'm aware of in the business of anyone could pull that off, it would be Jeremy.
Yeah.
But I don't actually know for this game. I find it interesting for this track. It's very much, I really like themes of either characters or races, and this very much is trying to create a theme for the race in general. It reminds me of like what the city themes in World of Warcraft often accomplish. They were short, about 1 to 2 minute tracks that focused around a central melody that kind of tried to create the identity for a given race.
Yes.
And that's to me what this is doing as well. That's one of the reasons I brought up the Lord of the Rings comparison in my mind, is that's really what Howard Shore was doing with Lord of the Rings soundtracks. He created very simple melodies for pretty much all of the major players, be it Mordor, Isengard, Gondor, Rohan, etc. And this, to me, very much is in that camp of composition.
You're entirely right. I could imagine this song being played in some slower, quieter moments, during maybe cutscenes or personal events. It uses the theme, with different instrumentation to capture a different mood.
Right. Yeah.
It does feel like, very sort of campaign music. And I think it does play in sort of story-related scenarios every now and then, definitely. And MMO players sort of love that. Every race gets their own style of music and or different sort of cultural places that have a sound to them that you can identify. And you identify with it as well through the races that you play, and this is your music. And like Ironforge, oh my god, everyone can hum the music of Ironforge, just because, it's so representative of the dwarves. And so I think it's very important for MMOs. And at the same time, what I always found interesting about Guild Wars 2 is it doesn't really have zone music anymore. If you think of older MMOs, in the sense that World of Warcraft is a good example. It's like this patchwork where you just have very distinct zones and borders between zones. And the moment that you transition between zones, there's a new track. you don't have that in Guild Wars 2. You don't have these very defined sort of square zones, and you don't have these borders for the music either. So it's a very different feeling when you travel around. And some tracks, they can pop up at different places. They're not really tied to just this one place. Like Elven Forest only plays in Elven Forest, right?
Yeah.
But this is not the case in Tyria.
I think you gain a lot and lose a lot by using that technique. I think you lose...
It's what the Elder Scrolls games do, but kind of to the extreme where there's no regional music in those games.
Skyrim actually does it a little bit, I think. I think certain tracks will only play around certain areas, but it's so subtle it's hard to tell. But but those are 3D games: World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, and Elder Scrolls. Maybe like the top 3 games for going out and having adventures, at least like in the traditional RPG or MMO space. So anyway, maybe we should start wrapping this up. Do you guys have any more thoughts about the song to cover before we end?
I think I said everything I had to say.
Exhausted everything.
I think we got it all. I mean, rad drums.
Okay, good. Rad
horns.
Drums. We'll finish.
Horns. Yes, I forgot to say horns.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned the horns enough.
Yes.
Maybe Jeremy Soule won't come on our show because you make fun of the horns.
Hey, no, he does amazing horns. I mean, especially if these are synthesized. That's crazy. It's so hard to get good sounding synthetic
Well, just
horns.
listen to Iron Forge for crying out loud.
Yeah,
sorry,
it's really
Jason
problematic.
Hayes. You're our friend. All right, let's head on to the outro then. This has been an episode of Train Station at 8, and we thank you for listening to it. If you want to contact us, you could always email us at trainstation8@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at trainstation8. We're also on Facebook and YouTube, so you can go look for us there too. We're of course part of the Whales Are Whales network, where you can find all kinds of other shows, kind of like this one, but with us again and occasionally other people. You can find me on Twitter too. I'm Stephen Kelly 180, and Bryan, you're Lord Meldor.
Yo, that's me. Yep.
That's pretty much us and Whales Are Whales in a nutshell. Sil, how about you? Anything you want to plug?
Sure, I'd like to plug Battle Bards since we've been talking about it. It's the world's only MMO music podcast where I talk on a bi-weekly basis with my 2 absentee co-hosts, Sip and Steph. It's at battlebards.libsyn.com. And we're also part of the Gaming and Entertainment Network, which hosts a couple of different gaming-related podcasts. It's tgennetwork.net. And I'm also on Twitter under gypsy_sil.
Well, very cool. That was a very concise and well-spoken batch of plugs. Well done.
Yay!
And that brings us to the end of the show. Again, thanks for listening. Next week, who knows what's going to happen? We're going to be changing up the format. We have all kinds of brand new ideas.
Next week is going to be about carpentry.
Yeah, we're really changing up the format.
What's the best video game music to listen to while doing carpentry?
Ooh, that's
That
actually...
could be a topic.
Oddly enough, I'm really interested to talk about that now. Ooh, I would say you should listen to the version of Mumbo's Mountain from Banjo-Kazooie that has all the little ants going 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
See, I would say listen to the Warcraft 3 soundtrack because you constantly have workers like building buildings and stuff in that game
so
and chopping down
good.
lumber.
Yes.
That you just play the Warcraft 3 soundtrack, and especially the human stuff, and you're just right in there.
All right, well, if we're going to talk about carpentry, Bryan, I suggest we table that subject for next week.
Nice.
And close out today's episode. So look forward to all that. Thanks for listening again. I've been Steven as usual. Bryan, you've been yourself. And Sil, thanks a lot for coming on board with us. We enjoyed it.
Hey, I had a blast. Thanks, you guys. It was really enjoyable.
You're very welcome. And we'll see everyone next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.